Well, Jim,
Yes.
you and I have been talking for years. We used to meet when I live in New York. You would visit New York. We used to meet at the Yale Club for breakfast.
Right.
You, at that time, ran the Eastman School. And one result of that is that I'm here now.
Right.
Because I think that developed the connection with Eastman that makes me do these interviews. But since then, as everybody knows, you have ascended.
Well, I don't know if it's ascended.
Well, you have taken this magnificent job as the man who now runs the Philadelphia Orchestra. And so you said you were afraid of the questions I was going to ask you. And the first one I had thought of is really simple and not sharp-toothed at all. It's how do you like it?
Ah.
What interests you about it? What surprised you about taking this job? What were you not ready for? What was the way you thought it was going to be?
Mm-hmm. Well, you know, it was irresistible in many ways because at Eastman we were working so much on these issues around orchestras in the future and building programs like polyphonic.org.
Right, and you had even been, for a good long while, part of the Mellon Foundation's Orchestra Forum, working with orchestras who were trying new things.
Yeah. So constantly hearing things from orchestral musicians like the real world, the other side. You know, you have to experience what it is.
Yes.
You know, I needed to, you know, this has been an opportunity to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And it is very different.
So what have you found out that you didn't know before?
For the first 6 months, I found myself telling people, everyone would ask the question, you know, how is it different?
Mm-hmm.
And the first 6 months, I would say, it's remarkably the same.
Because
there are, at Eastman, there were 100 tenured professors, and we have approximately 100 musicians, and the board relations and fundraising and budgetary issues, budget planning and whatnot. But now, I've been there 9 months, and the last 3 months I tell people, I can't believe how different it is.
And the differences would be, well, one I can think of is that, one thing we should just say in passing, for those who may not know this, music school faculty can be as tough as orchestral musicians are reputed to be.
Oh, yes.
Oh, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
But the difference is, one that I can think of is that the audience has got to be a major concern.
It is. That is clearly the difference.
Yeah.
As well as, of course, the musicians in a symphony orchestra are represented by a collective bargaining agreement.
Yeah.
And we could talk about that as well. But there's a sense of urgency and a sense of immediacy in the new job that actually I find very stimulating. And yes, there's the problem of that urgency brings with it almost the inability to do long-range planning. And so that's the fight that I on a daily basis. But
wait,
still,
let's stop and separate these issues a little bit because it's fascinating.
Yeah.
Tell me more about the urgency. How does this hit most directly? What are its components? What's urgent?
The audience reaction is very urgent in its and the audience reaction is so complex and broad when you're running such a gigantic orchestral operation. So that and we're in a new audience age of in the office, and I'm sure you've heard this expression that people want to hear what they want to hear, where they want to hear it, and when they want to hear it.
And so they buy tickets later, they don't subscribe nearly as readily.
Right.
And the numbers over the long term show this very clearly.
That's right. And orchestras have programmed a blend program, a formulaic blend, for as long as you and I can remember.
Yes.
Right?
And you and I grew up on it.
Exactly.
We, at one time, loved it.
Yeah. And the blend is not just each concert, which we think of something traditional, a concerto, an overture, and a symphony, and something a little that stretches you some. But it's also a blend over a whole season. So that the planning that is done in the artistic planning offices of these orchestras think, well, we'll do the John Adams Harmony Lyra, and that will appeal to a certain segment of our audience, but we'll quote-unquote lose money on that one, but we'll counterbalance that with a Schubert C major.
Yes.
Right? And this formula is not going to work moving into the future.
And
so
that is a seamless segue into the other point you raised about long-range planning.
Exactly.
Because if this is not going to work moving into the future, you have to find something else that works.
Yeah.
But there's a difficulty in finding the time, the resources, the money to do the long-range planning that will enable you to find what it is you're going to do.
Exactly. And it's not in the culture of the not-for-profit to say we need to invest $1 million+ in future projects because it's just not there.
And I have found this myself in my own work in the orchestra world. I have done projects with orchestras, and my sense is that the project never had a strategic plan attached to it. It was, let's do this, this will be nice, maybe this will get our audience more interested.
Right.
But because there was never a way to measure what the goal would be, there was also never any way to decide how long you needed to do it before you knew if you'd succeeded or not. And so normally these things would run out of gas in a couple of years because it really wasn't making any tangible difference. And maybe the problem was not simply that the goal hadn't been precisely articulated enough, but that this one thing, however wonderful it might have been, wasn't enough to make a tangible difference. You know, what you need is the balanced diet full of fruit and vegetables and a lot of exercise on the side.
Exactly. Well, we're exploring something called a segmentation strategy.
Yeah.
We've surveyed our audience about the music that they prefer, and this has actually been fascinating.
I'll bet.
50% of
and I know your marketing director, so and I know he thinks this way anyway.
50% of our audience likes the blend. You know, the fruits and vegetables and a little meat and whatnot. And 30% want more traditional programming. I'm surprised that it's actually that low.
Right.
10% want an access concert kind of experience. This doesn't mean that they're new to classical music, but they want someone talking about it. They want
I found that when I did a series called Symphony with a Splash with the Pittsburgh Symphony, we thought of it as being aimed at a new audience, and we were amazed when some of the Pittsburgh Symphony subscribers started coming.
I know the Rochester Philharmonic with their Symphony 101, it's mostly subscribers. And then 10% stated that they wanted more adventuresome music, which was hard for the board to understand. That was very interesting.
Oh, so the board is not included among those 10%?
Well, there are some board members who will tell me later
10%
I'm
probably.
part of that group.
Yes.
And so this summer we're doing a major audience preference study, I guess you would call it, using a website, and audience members will actually be asked to narrow it down to specific pieces. So in the office we have these wonderful conversations about whether Shostakovich 5 is blend or traditional. You know, and then and Rite of Spring, blend or traditional.
How do you know that the audience is actually right in what it says, that it can anticipate its own reactions? I
don't know.
Actually, I've heard that it is, but it's a question that always occurs to me. So what about the people who aren't coming?
Yeah.
Do you study them as well?
Yes, we do. In fact, last summer, one of the studies that was underway that I encouraged before I even began was that we wanted to, one group that we wanted to hear from was people who bought one ticket and then not come back.
Which is a very high number, as I understand it. Probably the large majority of your single ticket buyers.
Right. And then the other group we brought into the focus groups was people who had bought tickets to other cultural events, but who had never attended the Philadelphia Orchestra.
Right.
You know, Ed Cameron, who's the marketing director, who's quite wonderful.
He is.
I said to Ed, well, what was your reaction to the focus groups? He said, depression.
Yes. And by the way, I'm going to turn to the camera and I'm going to stress something that you just said. This is something that I've heard behind the scenes off the record from quite a while from a number of different orchestras, but you have surfaced it in this public forum. So I want to stress it, that the vast majority of single ticket buyers to major orchestras appear to come once and never return, which means that you're churning a large part of your single-ticket audience every year. And if your single-ticket audience is about a third of your ticket buyers, something like that,
in some cases more.
This means, in some cases more, this means that there's a third of your ticket buyers every year that you cannot at all be sure of, and you have to work for the large majority of them.
And marketing directors tell you that it costs much more.
It costs much more to sell a single ticket, obviously, than a subscription ticket. So this is a serious concern for orchestras.
And the one word that we could sum up from these focus groups was apathy. Apathy.
Meaning nobody cares?
That they came to a concert and it was fine. They enjoyed it. Well, but the question, would you come back?
Yes.
I don't know.
I don't know. Because what's going to happen? The same thing.
Yeah.
Now, this is something that it really is, but I understand it. If you ask most people what the Philadelphia Orchestra or the New York Philharmonic or the Rochester Philharmonic does, they would say, oh, they play classical music. They had a concert last week. What happened? They played classical music. Right. And the next concert, they're going to do that again. Now, you and I, and many of the people watching this, we can differentiate. And they say, my God, Shostakovich 4, you never hear that. Yeah. I'm going. But for the public at large, you have a real problem differentiating one event from another.
That's right. And it's this event concept that single ticket buyer responds to. So we're actually now also through Ed's leadership looking at a post-subscriber model.
Huh. You mean the world after subscriptions become not the main thing that you do?
Well, he believes, and I concur, that we're moving out of the subscriber world.
Right.
And whether we like it or not, it's going to happen, and we have to plan for it.
Right.
So we're looking at modeling something after the car share, these urban car share concepts.
Yeah.
We have one in Philadelphia called Philly Car Share.
Right. And this is the deal where there are cars available for people to use, and if you become part of the program, you find an available car and you can use it.
Yes, and you pay by the
use.
hour or use. Yeah, and so this will be called seat share.
Huh.
And you'll join at various levels of seat share, and then you'll have seats available to you at a discount right up to the day of the concert, and be able to go on your site with your membership, your log on, and click actually on the seat in the hall, and then print out your ticket on your computer, home computer.
Yeah.
So
how does that answer the apathy, though? Because it seems
it's
to
not
me
a direct response, but it
it
does respond to the last-minute ticket buyer.
It absolutely does, and very effectively, I would think. But the people who say, I don't know when or whether I would ever come back, I'm not sure it addresses them, because you have to be interested already to sign up.
Exactly, and that has to be addressed otherwise.
So what do you do?
Well...
Long-range planning again.
In segmentation, this segmentation strategy, we really believe that we have to be not only clear about what genre of classical music you'll be buying, so to speak, but it'll have to be identified within that genre. So the first step, I don't have the full answer to this, but the first step is being very clear with your audience about what they're going to hear, and segmenting that experience so that it lines up. We're looking at various technical, the screens enhancements, and selling a series around that so that it's not blend. Every concert has visual enhancements every fourth Thursday or something. So, but how to create a sense of event around every program? Interview me in a year, all right?
Because by then you'll have an idea of what works and what doesn't?
Well,
or you will have tried more things or planned
I think we will have tried and planned more, but one of the clear trends in the field right now is the concept of the music director being an artistic partner.
Yes.
Not
the undisputed maximum leader.
Exactly. And so that is responding to this issue, and I do think that we'll see movement in a more interesting direction around programming because of this trend.
And how does that make a difference?
It makes a difference because artistic planning then is done in a group process with input from different constituencies.
So you can actually have an artistic planning process, because orchestras, strangely enough, don't have this, do
That's
they?
right. No, they don't.
The music director typically plans his or her own concerts. The artistic administrator fills in the rest around whatever the guest conductors want to do, and the whole may have no shape, because there is no actual artistic director,
Right.
typically.
That's right.
Yes.
You know,
And
I
so
mean,
you're
in the
going
most
to-
in the most extreme circumstances, the music director faxes in his or her program.
Yes.
You know, and actually, in the most extreme circumstances, the music director will shape the guest conductor's programs as well.
Yes. Yeah. But often not.
But frequently,
Often
most
not.
often not.
Well, so
Yeah.
here we have an important case of a major orchestra facing what we know are some years of overall decline in ticket sales, this crisis, if I'm not speaking too strongly, and I don't think I am, about the end of the subscription era, and you're trying to find out what to do, and in a year we need to talk to you again
Yes.
to see if you make progress.
Yeah.
But something has to be done.
Yeah.
I want to turn, Jim, to two other questions if we have time. One of them is the relationship with the musicians.
Yes.
When you came in, the Philadelphia Orchestra had had a recent history of trouble in that department, the relations between musicians and management. How did you find that, and what have you done to ease things? Because knowing you, I would know that would have to be a major concern of yours, not just as administrator, but as a person.
Right. Well, the musicians and I, and not just me,
Yeah.
but had to face the end of the Eschenbach contract
Right.
together. So working through that together allowed us an opportunity to develop strong communication
And how did
with
you
each
do
other.
that? What was that about?
A lot of listening.
A lot of
Basically.
you listening and
Yeah.
other people in the administration listening to the musicians.
Yes.
And
Clearly, I established early on that I was going to be listening
Mhm.
and responding and
Yeah.
expecting them to listen
Right.
to me.
Right.
And I work strictly through two committees of the orchestra, although I know all the musicians, of course, through the artistic committee and through the,
Right.
the members committee, which
Yeah.
would be the, and we're
Yeah.
we're currently negotiating a new contract.
And how's that going? Is that
Well-
more amicable than it was in the past?
Yes.
That's terrific.
We had, I mean, and I feel confident that I can say this, and that is we had a negotiating session about how we would do it, and came to several agreements about that. And it addressed many of the errors and sins of the past.
The other thing I wanted to ask you, which may touch on a tender area, it's the matter of the music director. You were perceived as having essentially fired Christoph Eschenbach by telling him that his contract would not be renewed. And that strikes me, though perhaps I'm wrong about this, as a bolder move than many people in your position have made.
Yeah. Well, I was given the responsibility of carrying the message to
Yes.
Christoph. Clearly, we wanted him to continue in some fashion, but that was not to come to pass. But yes, I think that, and I'm going to back off the Eschenbach question
Sure.
specifically because he's a very fine man. And
I agree.
And,
He is. Yeah.
But talk more about the Philadelphia Orchestra before me had a chair who was the CEO. And they went through quite a planning process. And that dates back to 1901, that the chair was the CEO. And they went through quite a process after Dick Smoot resigned as chair and Joe Kluger stepped down as president, of looking at how they wanted to operate into the future. And so they created a president and CEO position.
Right. This is a major change in era
Yes.
for the Philadelphia Orchestra, because Joe had been in your position for quite a while. I don't remember the number of
17
years.
years.
17 years.
Yeah.
And I don't know how long Dick was the board chair,
About
but
5, I think.
about 5.
Yeah.
But this was a time for the orchestra to reevaluate.
Exactly.
Clearly.
And so part of the upshot of that was giving more authority.
Yes.
And so they in their search process, they looked for an executive who had a strong musical background.
Yeah. Which is not the most common thing
No.
in orchestras.
So that's where that came from, although it was not my decision solely. I mean, it was something that clearly was quite a history that I inherited on the music director question.
Yes.
Yeah.
But according to the artistic model that you sketched earlier, it should not be your decision alone.
Exactly.
It's my sense that musical decision-making has not been spread widely enough among the constituencies of orchestras.
Correct.
The musicians, who are by far, if you ask me, the most underused resource of any orchestra, have had very little to do with it. Most people in the staff feel that they have no competence to talk about musical questions, although if you talk to them, they may turn out to be much savvier than they think they are.
Right.
And the artistic staff would be a tiny fraction of the people in orchestras. And I've also talked to board members and board chairs who believed that they had no authority to say anything. Not at your orchestra, but at other places.
I'm not surprised.
So you have the funny spectacle of a major, and in your case, multi-million-dollar institution, which really makes these decisions in a very, very small circle, without maybe any long-range plan involved.
And this is what I'm working to change.
Yes.
Yeah.
And what it means is it's very hard for the institution to have buy-in to an artistic direction, because most people haven't been part of the discussion and won't even be asked afterwards what they think.
That's right. It was so interesting coming into the organization and seeing all these very talented people operating in silos.
Yes.
And then insisting that they talk to each other and watching the friction. It was just amazing.
Can you give any kind of example?
Well, and these two, I won't say who they are,
not.
but everything's good now. Let's put it that way. But two of them came into an early senior staff meeting. This must have been in October, and they were just bright red. They said, "We just had a terrible fight." And I said, "Then things are working," which they didn't understand. But now they do, because there are boundaries in symphony orchestras that historically have never been crossed.
Can you give an example?
Well, I mean, artistic planning, for instance, has historically been the prestigious domain
of one or two or three people.
Right. And they communicate with the music director and the soloists and the guest conductors, and it's prestigious.
Yes.
Yeah. And marketing is, oh dear,
That is exactly the one I was thinking about.
Yeah.
I have worked the number of major orchestras with the marketing departments, and I have been present in conference calls when the marketing department first learns the next season's artistic plans.
Yes.
And the unspoken phrase, if you had a comic book thought balloon over the head of the marketing people, it would be, "Oh, spit." How are we going to sell this?
Yeah.
And what's actually more remarkable than artistic people coming up with a plan that the marketing people don't think they can sell is that the marketing people had no idea what the artistic people were thinking until the artistic people were finished.
They carry it down the hall.
They carry it down the hall and say, "Here, fait accompli, all done."
Right.
And you would think that that was wrong on so many levels.
Yeah.
For one thing, the marketing people have no buy-in. So if they initially think it's hard, they have no incentive to work overtime to make it happen. And because they haven't been consulted, they don't know why it's being done. Right. And also on a simple human level, it's so discourteous.
Yeah. And not that we're like a manufacturing operation, but can you imagine a car?
No, of course.
Being designed and then driven off the assembly line, and then the marketing department is told to go sell it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Whereas when you say you don't want to be like a car company, you say you don't want to say to the marketing department, "What can you sell?" and then program exactly that.
Right.
But the marketing department could easily fine-tune even challenging artistic plans and say, I remember one, this is completely not orchestras. It comes from a conversation I had more than a decade ago with the marketing director of the Metropolitan Opera. He was saying, okay, 4 or 5 productions every year I can't sell, but the artistic department wants to do. Fine, he says, at that time they were selling 92% of their tickets. He didn't think it was a problem if 4 or 5 productions had half full houses. And parenthetically, it was fascinating to me that he never cared to see if he could develop any audience for that, because he was making his nut overall. But leaving that apart, the one small wistful thought he had was if only they could do Berg's Wozzeck at a time when European tourists were in New York. They would buy tickets to it, but the tourists in New York from elsewhere in the United States would not. So that was a small point in which the marketing department could have helped the institution carry out the kind of artistic plan that you'd think marketers would not like.
Yes.
And I'm sure there are many other examples.
I can think of several, but in the interest of time. But that's right. Yep. Or they'll think of a way to enhance something, to build on an artistic idea that makes it much more interesting.
Or I know in the case of your marketing director, I have heard him say that there's a certain percentage, you're saying now 10% of your audience that likes ambitious, on-the-edge things, and so why not program some things specifically for them? And so there's a point of a marketing director saying what you would not expect, saying, let's concentrate in a certain way on doing unusual things, rather than always marginalize them by doing the Tchaikovsky concerto after intermission.
On that topic, and one of the upshots of some of the planning was that on our Discovery concerts, which always have an ambitious repertoire, we're doing after-concert concerts that start at 10:30 and take it much further, much more challenging music, chamber music on stage. And I think anywhere between 500 and 800 audience members are staying.
Are they really?
And they're young, some not aren't young, but they're staying for those concerts, which end after 11. Isn't that amazing?
And
that came out of artistic planning.
And what does that do for those audience members' relationship to the orchestra? Are they subscribers, single ticket buyers?
I don't know the answer to that, but I have to believe that.
You have to believe it's good.
It's working.
Yes. Because they're staying of their own free will.
Right.
Presumably they stayed because they were enthusiastic about the possibility of what they would hear. Right. I would imagine their reaction is enthusiastic.
Very.
How about the overall problem of the younger audience, so much talked about? Is this something that you concern yourself with?
Quite a bit. And seat share is directed. I know the Boston Symphony tried something along these lines with colleges in Greater Boston, providing access to X number of concerts. But I believe the weakness of that, and we're correcting, is that they couldn't go online, click on the ticket, print it out, and come.
What did they have to do?
They had to go down to the hall and, and we do have rush, and it does bring a number of young people in. But no, we've been marketing to the younger crowd very heavily, and those publications and media outlets in Philadelphia that target younger people. I was surprised at first to read in City Pages. It's one of the free newspaper. There we are up next to some of the most interesting things.
You mean in terms of your advertising?
Yeah.
And does it work? Do you get a response?
We do get a response. Which is very encouraging. And of course, downtown Philadelphia now is growing. People are moving into Center City, younger people, and so we're marketing directly to them.
Right. That is obviously encouraging. Some studies have shown that people under 40 primarily get information about things they want to do from word of mouth.
Yes.
Do you try viral marketing at all?
I can't answer that, but I would guess. Oh, my.
What an adventure for you, Jim.
It is. It's very interesting. And when I talk about it like this, it makes it more interesting.
I was going to say that I think every person watching this is going to say, this man is enjoying it. He has a real appreciation for the job.
Thanks. Well, thanks for this great interview.
You're welcome. It's been fun.
Thanks, Greg.